Hey, this is Will. So in this episode, I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know about living in Tbilisi, Georgia. Once you listen to this or watch this, you will know everything that you need to know before coming to Georgia, from all of the accommodation aspects of the community, the food, the climate, the overall costs, everything that you need to know. By the way, I will leave some useful links and some of the things that I might not mention in this episode because I am talking off the cuff. So check out the description, a lot of useful stuff there. I also am starting a digital nomad community, so there's going to be a link how you can join that as well. So first of all, let's start out with accommodation, because this is one of the main things that you will need to figure out. And when it comes to Tbilisi, accommodation is really good. If I think about some of the other countries I've personally been to, there are maybe better options. If you look somewhere, let's say in Southeast Asia, they do have some very cheap and very good new apartments. However, aside from that, I would say Georgia, Tbilisi is surprisingly good. It has some of the cheapest Airbnbs you will be able to find anywhere. And if I compare Tbilisi to, let's say, obviously Europe, North America, but also if I compare it to something like Central America or South America, and even some places in East Asia, I would say Georgia is definitely by far better. You have some very cheap Airbnbs, and that's kind of the thing as well. You can find cheap Airbnbs honestly anywhere you really go, but it's all about the cost and the quality ratio. And I think Tbilisi does have some really nice looking apartments for very cheap price. So even through Airbnb, you can get a very nice deal. And if you go off Airbnb, if you look at Facebook groups, if you look at some websites that are specific for Georgia or some agents, you can get even better. You can get a really good deal. You can find a pretty decent good new apartment for as low as $500 a month. The apartments do depend on which area you're going to stay at. So in Tbilisi, you have your Old Town, which is basically the more touristy type of area. Then you have up and coming area near, you're probably going to come across when you do some research, you're going to come across Fabrica, which is this hipster place that has a co-working space as well. And that area is a little bit more up and coming, so accommodation there is going to be a little bit cheaper. Then you have some other areas that are just sort of where people tend to live. In general, expats tend to live and not just tourists stay. So that's around Vaca Park and all of that area. So it depends really where you choose to stay. The prices are going to differ a little bit, but in general, I would say that you can find really good accommodation in any of these places. The next thing is community, and personally I think this is very important aspect whenever you go to a new digital nomad destination. And Tbilisi surprisingly is really good when it comes to community. Honestly, I've been to quite a few different places and I didn't expect that much from Georgia, or well, I never heard that much about Georgia. I heard few people saying this and that. When I started doing my research, I was surprised how many people were praising Georgia, and it's actually becoming a huge digital nomad hotspot. And especially during this whole pandemic and all of that, a lot of countries closed down, but Georgia kept open and a lot of people came here. So there's definitely a lot of people you can meet. So you have a lot of digital nomads that just came from all of the different countries. The Facebook community is pretty big. There's quite a few of different events that you can join. There's quite a few different co-working spaces. And when it comes to locals as well, you also can interact with locals. So in some countries, you do have quite a bit of a language barrier, but when it comes to Tbilisi, when it comes to Georgia, I would say it isn't that bad. I would say that yes, you're going to struggle maybe communicating with older people, but as long as a person is, I would say, 30 years or younger, most likely they are going to speak at least a little bit of English. And if you go to some of the co-working spaces and sort of just more hip type of places, most of the people are going to speak English, and they speak pretty good English, I would say, as well. So kind of touching on the same concept as I already mentioned a little bit, when it comes to co-working spaces, you do have quite a few different options. There are some co-working spaces that basically it's the same brand, but they just have different branches around the city. But you do have, I think, at least 5 different options as of making of this episode. And the actual co-working spaces, they are pretty good. They look very, very nice, and you have all the facilities you need, and they're pretty well sized. And the price itself is pretty good as well. I would say it's around 1 month is around $100, maybe $120. Next point is food, and I know this is very, very important to some people. And in general, I would say, as much as I have heard from other people, as much as I have talked with my friends and went to Georgian restaurants before even coming to Georgia, everyone seems to like Georgian food. There might be a couple of exceptions out there, but in general, I would say Georgian food is really, really good. So first of all, let's talk about local food. So when it comes to local food, you have, I don't even know what to exactly compare it to, but basically you do have, I'm not gonna lie, you have a lot of breads and cheeses, and at least personally, I think they are very, very good. So not getting fat is going to be quite a bit of challenge, but at the same time, I do have to say they have some really nice stews, and they have some nice vegetable dishes as well. So there is a little bit of, you have a few different options to choose from, which is nice, that because in some countries when you go there, pretty much all of the food is exactly the same and it tastes exactly the same. Whereas in Georgia, I would say you do have different options depending on what you feel, which is very, very nice. And when it comes to local food, again, it depends a lot where exactly you eat, because if you will go to Tbilisi, let's say Old Town, you will have some restaurants that are basically just catering tourists, and the prices there are going to be much higher. But in general, I would say you can have a nice local dish somewhere between $3 to $5. And usually this is quite a lot of food, by the way. Usually it's going to be very, very filling. Again, if you go to some of the fancier places, then the prices might increase a little bit, but still it is, I would say, very, very cheap compared to a lot of different countries. And if you want Western food, there's actually a lot of different options of Western food, especially, I don't know why, but they have a lot of burger places, a lot of pizza places, so you can definitely find Western food. And Western food is obviously going to be a little bit more expensive, but I would say still in comparison it is very, very cheap. You can find some good Western food for as low, I would say, from $5 to $10. And again, if you want, you can also find some really, really nice restaurants that are a little bit higher scale, and you're going to have an amazing dinner that might cost you only, let's say, $15 or $20, which is just absolutely amazing. So definitely a huge thumbs up, I would say, in terms of food when it comes to Tbilisi. Also, I will admit I didn't know this before, but Georgia is really famous for wine, and I'm even surprised, I don't know why, but I don't think it's really internationally well known, but I do like Georgian wine quite a bit, and other people do seem to be positive about it as well. And according to some people, wine was even invented in Georgia, so you will definitely see a lot of wineries, wine shops, wine restaurants, bars, and so on and so forth. And you can get some really good wine for very cheap price. A lot of places, when you go to the restaurants, they will have home wine. So you can get basically a jug of home wine for as little as $5, which again, if you like wine, it's absolutely phenomenal. Next point is transportation. So when it comes to Tbilisi specific, transportation is really good. I will give them a lot of props when it comes. So basically you have a metro in Tbilisi, but I wouldn't say you're going to use, well, depending on your situation, most of the time I would say you're not really going to use the metro that much, because the city itself is 1 million and a bit of people, so it's not a huge city that requires, long distance travel or anything like that. Most of the time I would say if you're going to use public transportation, you're going to use buses, and there are a lot of buses. They are very easy to get on and they are pretty frequent, so really it's very convenient. And again, depending on where exactly you're going, but in a lot of places it's going to be very easy to just come outside, maybe wait for a couple of minutes, jump on a bus, take a 10-minute bus, and already be on basically sort of the other side of the city where you want to be. And the trip itself is going to cost you, I think it's in American cents, it's around 20 cents, something crazy cheap like that. And I think you can even use this for 90 minutes. Once you tap your card, you can use it for 90 minutes. So it's absolutely amazing. The public transportation doesn't cost anything and it's fairly well connected. And if you don't want to take public transportation, or if you sometimes want to take taxis, you can download certain apps. So I don't think they actually have Uber in Georgia, but they do have other apps, and I will leave actually some links, some even invites with special promotions so you can get your rides for free to begin with. But they have their own apps, or well, they have different apps from Uber that you can use in Tbilisi, and they are insanely cheap. This must be one of the cheapest. I don't even know. When I think about Southeast Asia, it's probably the same, or Tbilisi might be even a little bit cheaper. Anywhere you go within the city, you're probably going to pay around 5 lari, which is, it's not even $2. And that is, well, within the city, you don't really need to, again, travel that much. It's not a huge city. Usually a ride, let's say, it's going to take you somewhere, maybe maximum 15-20 minutes. And that ride, 15-20 minutes, usually is going to be somewhere around 5 lari. So that's very cheap, very affordable. Public transportation is extremely cheap and taxis very cheap as well. Next thing we have is entertainment and going out in general. And there are quite a few things you can do within this city. As I said, it's not a massive, huge city, but it's fairly decent sized city, and they really do offer pretty much whatever you want to find. If you want to find some rock climbing, if you want to find, let's say, painting club or something like that, you will be able to find a lot of different things. When it comes to some of the things in terms of language, you're not always going to find everything in English, so that might be a little bit troublesome depending on what you want to do. In terms of just going out, if let's say you want to go out to movies, by the way, I think movies, again, depending on when exactly you go, I think average ticket I would say is somewhere about $5 to $6, something like that. And if you want to go out to, let's say, a bar, have some drinks, then I would say drinks are very cheap. Again, depending on what kind of place you are going, but if you're going to, I would say, a decently nice place and sort of, I would say, like the average restaurant or a bar, you probably are going to pay around, for a glass of wine, you're probably going to pay $2, maybe $3 if it's a little bit nicer place. And for, let's say, a bottle of beer, you're probably going to pay around the same price as well, maybe around a couple of dollars. And when it comes to cocktails, maybe let's say $5 for a cocktail. So I would say, depending on, again, what you compare it to, but in average, in terms of all of the different digital nomad destinations, I would say that going out is pretty cheap. And when it comes to the actual going out, I would say it's really good fun. I would say people like to go out here quite a bit, and I think people like to also drink quite a bit. So if you are a drinker, if you like sometimes to get a little tipsy, then this is definitely a pretty good place. And it depends, again, where you want to go out and all of that. And because of the pandemic, obviously, things have changed a lot. So it's a little bit hard to say with the current situation right now, but in general I would say that the nightlife seems to be pretty fun. Now when it comes to general goods, buying things, buying groceries, all of those kind of things, so you do have a lot of supermarkets, big supermarkets around the city, and you also have a small stores on pretty much every corner around. And I would say that you do have a fairly good selection of different products. You do have a lot of Georgian products, but you also have a lot of European products as well. And also you can find a lot of local markets. So you can go to, there are some big local markets that pretty much sell whatever you might want. And there are also these very small markets that basically just some people, some old grandpa or grandma selling some fruits or vegetables just outside in a little kiosk by the street. So there's quite a lot of those as well. Food prices in general, I would say, are pretty good. I wouldn't really say, at least I haven't noticed it being much more expensive or much cheaper. I would say it's pretty good in general. And when it comes to everything else, let's say if you want to buy some clothes or some other things, there are quite a few different malls. And I will say that you do, again, depending on where you are coming from, at least for me, coming from Europe, I would say that they do have quite a few brands that you might be used to in Europe. And in general, I would say when it comes to finding different things, you're not going to have a problem most of the time. The only thing that you do need to keep into consideration is that when it comes to electronics, Georgia is not really the country. It's going to be a little bit hard to find some electronic devices, and it's going to be a little bit expensive as well. So if you think you might need something, then perhaps make those purchases before coming into Georgia. Now let's talk internet. This is actually also one of the major things as a digital nomad. So when it comes to Georgia, from what I found out talking with some locals as well, is that the minimum speed of internet is usually 20 megabytes, and it can go up to 100. I don't really know. I don't really think it can go above 100 yet, at least as making of this episode. But usually people will have at least 20. And again, if they upgrade, if you rent out an apartment, you want to upgrade, you can upgrade to 100 megabytes, which is not that bad. And when you go to, let's say, some cafes, by the way, this is something I also forgot to mention I would say this is kind of related to co-working spaces. At least for me personally, I like to work from cafes a lot. And the Tbilisi definitely has a lot of really cool cafes to choose from and to work from. From my experience though, and I'm in Tbilisi right now, and I haven't went to, I wouldn't say I have went to that many yet, but I did went to a few, and the internet wasn't the best. So I would say it can be a little bit tricky, but again, this really depends. And as I said, you have a lot of options, so you'll definitely find some cafes that have very fast internet, but keep in mind that some of them might not have the best internet, but there is a solution for that. So in Tbilisi, in Georgia in general, you will want to get a SIM card, a local SIM card. And the SIM cards, I would say they are priced really well. So basically, if you want to get unlimited internet, And this is one inside trip, by the way. As far as I hear it from everyone, you want to get Makti network. So there are a few different ones like Beeline and whatever else. But as far as understood, all of them are pretty rubbish, but Makti is by far the best, especially if you're going to go outside the city and you will be traveling somewhere. But even within the city, as far as understood, it's the best. So unlimited internet with that, at least when I got it, it was costing around $20 for 1 month. So that's really, really good. And the speed, I would say, again, it depends where exactly you are within the city. But when I was testing the speed, I think it was around 50, 60 megabytes, which I think is very decent. And if you go to a cafe that doesn't have the best Wi-Fi, then you can always create a hotspot and work from that. And that actually seemed to work pretty well. The speed obviously drops a little bit, but I think I still had maybe 30 to 40 megabytes on my laptop just hotspotting from my phone. Now, when it comes to climate, this is one of those things that I wish it was slightly different. So when it comes to Tbilisi and, well, Georgia almost in general, the climate, I would say, is pretty extreme. So the summer gets really, really hot. So in Tbilisi, you can get up to, well, more than 30 degrees Celsius. I'm sorry, I don't know what it is Fahrenheit, but that's pretty hot. And during winter, it can go as low as 7 degrees, or during the night, it can even go into a little bit of minus. Again, this is Celsius, so it definitely can get very, very cold. Though again, I guess it depends what exactly you are considering cold by yourself. And usually you have, I would say, sort of warm weather pretty much from May, maybe even starting from April. From May, the weather gets not so bad, I would say. You might have somewhere in those 20 degrees Celsius. And now it is October, beginning of October, as I'm recording this. And the weather actually, it fluctuates here quite a bit as well. So last week, for example, it was all the way down to 10 degrees Celsius. But then today, I think it's 17 degrees, and in a couple of days, it's supposed to be 25 degrees. So the weather can fluctuate quite a bit just week by week. But in general, October is still supposed to be somewhere around, in average, supposed to be 20 degrees Celsius. So that's still pretty decent. And after that, the winter should come and it should get quite a bit colder. I will say the one thing that you don't have a ton of rainfall from what I noticed, and when you look at the stats online, the rainfall levels are really not that high. And when it rains, it seems to just drizzle. It doesn't rain like you have the tropical rain, let's say in Southeast Asia, where you leave and you're wet within 10 seconds. Here, you can actually walk in the rain and it isn't even that bad, as long as it isn't cold at the same time. And one more thing I will say is that even though it gets quite cold in Tbilisi itself, I don't know what exactly it is. I need to check actually what's the humidity, but I don't know whether it's the wind or the humidity or what. It doesn't seem as cold as some of the other places. If I would be in the same temperature in England, I remember being in even warmer weather in England and completely freezing. So even though the temperature can get pretty low, I would say it doesn't feel as freezing. Next point is safety, and this is one of those things that I would say, again, I am pretty surprised about Tbilisi and Georgia. Again, I didn't really know much before coming here, but Tbilisi and Georgia itself is sort of part of Europe, part of Asia. And when you look at Europe honestly isn't that safe anymore. And I didn't quite know what to expect coming here as well, because especially if you look at some of the countries that are not very rich in Europe, they do tend to have some crime, but Georgia seems to actually be very safe. And you obviously take this with a pinch of salt, because anything can happen at any time. But as much as I talk with people, as much as what I see, what I experience by myself, I do have to say that it seems very, very safe. Now, when it comes to language, I already kind of mentioned a little bit that older people are not really going to speak English. People below 30, they are going to usually speak at least a little bit of English. And depending again where you hang out, you might be able to find people that speak very, very good English. In general, living in this city, the thing is, Georgian language is a very, very unique language. It's not really related to anything, and their alphabet, I don't even know how to explain it. Just Google what the alphabet, it looks like something completely different from everything I've seen. And you're not really, it's going to be a little bit tough to get around in certain cases, because what I noticed as well, and I don't know why this is the case, but with Google Translate, usually you have the camera app, so you can just point the camera to the text and it translates the text. And I always use that, let's say when you go even in Vietnam or Thailand, where they also have different alphabet, Google Translate would still be able to translate for me. And obviously it wasn't perfect, but at least I could get a little bit of a sense what exactly is what. And believe me, that helps so much sometimes. And for some reason, that is not possible. It doesn't, Google Translate just doesn't do the camera function here in Georgia with Georgian language. And when it comes to life in general, obviously if you go to the little bit more touristy areas, then you are going to have the translations. But I did notice that in quite a few places, you're not going to find English, but in general, I would say it is not too bad. Now, when it comes to visas, and this is something that's very, very interesting about Georgia in general. If you want to come to Georgia, again, depends which country you're coming from. Obviously, check the laws exactly for yourself. But for most of the people, well, not most of the people, but for a lot of people, you don't even need to have a visa to come to Georgia, and you can stay for 365 days, basically the whole year you can stay in Georgia. And at least for me, that's the case. I can just show up here, I don't need to do anything, and I can stay for a whole year. Maybe one thing to take into consideration is, and I don't know this exactly, but I did hear somewhere that if you stay in Georgia for, I think it was over 180 days, so more than half a year, then you are supposed to pay tax here, but you need to look into that yourself. I haven't stayed here yet for 180 days, so I don't know this exactly. But on that same note, if you want to establish a company, and by the way, if you can get a visa from your country, there is, I know, an option that you can apply for digital nomad visa for Georgia. So they seem to really be pushing a lot to attract digital nomads, to attract foreign business and investment and all that kind of stuff. So you can actually apply and you can get digital nomad visa. And I do know that they have a lot of perks. So again, depending on what exactly you do, what is your income, so on and so forth, you can register a business here, which as far as understood is very, very simple to do. And once you do that, again, depending on how exactly you do it, you can even get very, very low tax rate. So if this is something that interests you, then definitely look into it. I do know that a lot of people come to Georgia and open a bank account here, which is very simple as well. And a lot of people open companies here as well. So the overall vibe in the city, I would say it's very, very interesting, honestly. I would say it's a very unique place. And again, I feel like I've been to quite a few places now around the world. And for some reason, I like this quite a bit because it has that European architecture, but at the same time, it's a little bit different, and you do feel a little bit that the country has been occupied. It has been part of the USSR before, so you do feel a little bit of that. But also they have this whole medieval history that is just, at least for me personally, I found it absolutely amazing. It's so beautiful. So the city itself, I feel, for me personally, has a very cool vibe in terms of just architecture, how things look. And I would say it's surprisingly European. I honestly didn't quite expect that. It is, I would say, especially if you compare it, for example, how much money you are going to spend living here, and let's say how much other cities cost in Europe, it's a lot less, but it still has that very nice European type of vibe. And aside from that, also another thing that I personally was quite surprised about is that the city is very hipster-ish. So you will see from a lot of people, again, depending on the area where you hang out, there are some areas where people actually dress very posh and there are very nice restaurants and all of that. It's more upscale, but also a big part of the city, I would say, is very hipster-ish. So you have a lot of places where just the way people dress, they look very hipster. The restaurants, they have very cool, nice hipster vibe. You will see graffiti in a lot of different places around the city. So definitely, if this is your type of vibe, if you like this sort of chill, laid back, hipster-like vibe, then it's definitely a very cool place. Now let's talk general costs, because I know this is pretty important for a lot of people when coming to a new place. So honestly, again, depending what you want to compare it to, obviously if you go to Southeast Asia, it's going to be cheaper, but aside from that, I would say that it is, I think, one of the cheapest options out there. As I said, you get really cheap accommodation and you get actually really good value for the accommodation. The food is, again, very cheap. Transportation is very cheap. And going out, again, I would say is very cheap compared to most of the places. So in general, when you combine all of these things, I would say it's what you get, especially for the price. Again, it might not be the cheapest option out there in the world, but the value you get for your money, I think, is one of the best out of all of the different digital nomad destinations. So let me know if you have some other questions. I'm sure that I forgot to mention some of the things because I just have been talking off the cuff of some of the things that I personally think that are usually important for people, for digital nomads. Do let me know if you have any other questions, or if you agree with some of the things, you want to add some extra things. Do leave all of those in the comments. If you're listening to this as a podcast, just take the title, put it on YouTube and find the video and leave whatever you want in the comments section. As I said, I will leave some other useful information, useful links in the description, so make sure to check all of those out. And I am creating this digital nomad community. So again, there's going to be a link in the description. Definitely join and to meet like-minded people. If you found this useful, make sure to smash the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, put on those notifications so you see more videos or listen to more episodes like this. Stay awesome, and I'll see you soon.